and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today it's the 500th movie reviewed. Not my 500th video. Some videos that I've done, like tackling whole franchises like, Amityville, have done multiple movies in one video. However, in terms of the movies that I have discussed and scored, this is number 500. And I was honestly kind of wondering what to do with this. What movie to tackle, how to approach this, and so on. And then I had a brainstorm that I would in some way let my patrons decide. So I put out a notice to them and said, look, toss me some recommendations. I'll do a random drawing. It'll be kind of a mixture between the folks that have supported me the most over the years as well as some fate. And fate did indeed intervene. Because for the most part, Liam, the patrons responded very surprisingly. They did not offer up suggestions, Liam, but instead they told me that I should pick the movie that means the most to me. And I thought that that was very touching, and I thought that that was a very good idea. So I am going to honor their request and do exactly that. So back to the drawing board I went, and I really couldn't escape this one title. Out of the entire history that I've had with horror films and so on and so forth, this is one that I keep going back to. It's an annual watch for me, and it probably has made the biggest impact on my movie watching life. Today, I am proud to review the Sam Raimi classic, Evil Dead 2. I actually made a promise to myself that I'm breaking here, and this happens a whole lot, but I made a promise to myself when I first started this channel that I would not review movies out of sequence, that I would not review the third in a trilogy without having done the legwork on the previous two. I've ruined that a few times in the past, and I'm going to continue that tradition of ruining it here. I have not reviewed an Evil Dead movie yet, and I really wanted to discuss the one that made the biggest impact on me. This is going to be a review / testimonial for myself and my history, in all honesty. I know that my story in terms of growing up and so forth resonates and reflects a lot of you out there. I've heard from countless people when I've told this story that they shared the same experiences where they might have grown up in a fairly strict religious household. Not a whole lot of horror was on the shelf. But when the family went out and went to the video store and started browsing the aisles and the shelves, one of the first things that I did was beeline it to the horror section. I knew I couldn't rent any of them. My dad would never allow it, but I still loved looking at the box. The poster, the back and front and so forth, and just getting creeped out by the imagery. It was this fascination with the macabre that I wasn't really able to fully explore yet. And one of the movies that kept pulling me back, that I kept just being completely fascinated and horrified by the box, was Evil Dead 2. So when I started branching out into my own cinematic journey, I actually started branching out into a whole lot of different journeys. I started exploring all different religions, so on and so forth. And one of the areas that I explored was my movie watching self. And in doing so, I decided that I would finally pull the trigger on the box that captivated me so. And I rented and I watched Evil Dead 2, and my world has never been the same since. I don't consider this to be a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but in a weird, odd sense, I do consider it to be almost the perfect horror film. And I know that that's a big statement, and I'm going to put some caveats on there because horror transcends all manner of different thought processes, philosophies, so on and so forth. Some of it can be very quiet and subdued. Some of it can be very, slapsticky, and some of it can be very critical of society and some good subtext and, even allegories in that regard. So, there's a whole lot of different tonal methodologies that can be employed with horror. However, just taking an objective look at Evil Dead 2, I have to admit that not only is there a certain sense of nostalgia involved here, but just objectively pulling back and looking at it for what it is, it's remarkable as a film. So we had this ragtag group of individuals, Sam Raimi, Scott Spiegel, Bruce Campbell, so on and so forth, and they had grown up watching horror films. It was an enthusiastic, wonderful, whimsical time of their juvenile lives, and they set out to make movies of their own. They did a series of shorts and so forth until finally they made The Evil Dead and released it in 1981. It hit the Cannes Film Festival, largely to not a whole lot of fanfare until the iconic moment in which Stephen King himself gave his positive review and a quote attribution to it. And at that point, the wheels were in motion. It looked like these folks were actually going to have some marks in Hollywood. Sam Raimi got put on the 1985 movie Crime Wave, written and directed by Sam Raimi and Joel and Ethan Coen, until 1987 when they finally released Evil Dead 2, which was almost a loose remake slash sequel slash whatever you really want it to be of The Evil Dead. It could be interpreted as a direct sequel only insofar as if you're willing to have the belief that Bruce Campbell's character of Ash Williams was stupid enough to go back to the cabin and repeat the whole process, which is not entirely un-Ash-like. Even so, there was an ignorance of the characters that kind of just simply spoke to the notion that this is the first go-around for all of them. And not only was this a chance to kind of remake the film that they had originally intended in the first place, but it was also a way for them to kind of show what they've learned over the course of the last 6 years being part of the Hollywood machine and continuing to film their own projects, things like that. They finally said, let's see what we can really do here. And I think that that really shines through. I am a fan of The Evil Dead, but I do admit that it is rough around the edges. I mean, in a way that actually benefits the film. It's not a bad mark against it. It actually works in service of this ragtag group of filmmakers going out and filming shit. But I think The Evil Dead 2 is just significantly better in almost every single way. So for those few of you that have never heard of this movie, or at the very least have never seen it and don't really know what it's about, Bruce Campbell plays Ash Williams, a young man that goes out to a remote cabin with his girlfriend Linda for just an exciting little romantic getaway weekend together, until they discover that the cabin had been previously occupied by an unknown person who left behind a tape recorder, and when Ash plays the recording back, he finds the voice of Professor Raymond Knowby, who is reciting incantations from the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, and thereby calling forth demons. The demons take many different types of forms. It will possess folks, it will possess body parts, and it kind of does it with a bit of a haphazard, whatever the filmmakers feel like injecting in terms of any particular character at any particular moment getting monsterfied. There's not really a whole lot of rules or rhyme or reason involved here. It just is. So when I said that I do consider this to be in some ways almost the perfect horror film, I mean that it's fun. It has some good creepy moments. I think this was a perfect balance, in all honesty, because we really did have, in 1981, we had The Evil Dead, which was really trying to kind of play up, ragtag filmmaker style, but even so, straight horror movie. And then we had the third film, Army of Darkness, which was almost Jason and the Argonauts meets very campy silliness meets horror. And then we have Evil Dead 2, which is kind of squarely in the middle because it does balance the true horror elements alongside the silly camp. And it's not really afraid to go as far as it possibly can in either direction. And that's one of the things I love the most about it, is just how well balanced this film was. Yes, it does have the camp. Yes, it does have the silliness. Yes, it does have the one-liners. Yes, it does have the iconic hero standing tall over top of disembodied demons and so forth with a chainsaw. Groovy. But at the same time, it's also not really afraid to have just gallons and gallons of blood, massive gore, and some good, decently scary elements. And I honestly think that part is almost forgotten in the nostalgia for the camp. I distinctly remember that first time that I watched this, and you have the first half of the film that's fairly isolationist. It really does kind of start out with just Ash Williams on his own. First of all, kudos to Bruce Campbell for actually holding down the fort with a pretty solo performance. That's almost a death knell to a lot of films that really can't pull off having one person in a static location holding on to the interest of the audience for that movie. And second of all, that isolationist environment, I do recall that first time that I watched it was scary. He's just literally all alone with all manner of shit being thrown at him, and the sound design is fantastic, the creaks and the moans of the cabins and everything going along there. The special effects are incredible, and all the weird shit that's clearly just toying with Ash, I think it just made for a magnificent, yes, silly, but also, yes, scary film. And as a result, this is a movie that didn't just change the game, it's also a movie that honestly redefined the genre for decades to come. It gave us iconic scenes and monsters and gore elements and so forth, and it also gave us one of the best and stupidest protagonists and heroes ever. Ash Williams is not a character that you want to be, but he is a character that you would like to have by your side only when there are demons around. And even then, only if you have earplugs and a strong stomach. This is a movie that really did mean a great deal to me, and this really did kick off my love of horror. I meant it when I said I was never the same after that. And to its credit, I will often, if this is going to be the 11th year in which I am hosting a 24-hour Halloween horror movie marathon. And I would say that for the first 7 or 8 years, it just got a little bit repetitive, but for the first 7 or 8 years, Evil Dead 2 was the movie that kicked it off. In a situation where I tried very hard not to have movies repeat across marathons over the years, that was the holdout. For the first several years, that was the first movie shown each and every time. In a genre that really does speak to the independent filmmaker and low-budget ragtag groups of friends getting together with a camera and trying to make the goriest, best shit they possibly could, this is a film that speaks to that grounded, rogue filmmaking element. It shows that it is possible to turn out something really great if you have the guts and the creativity to go along with it. Honestly, when I encounter a film that is a low-budget movie that just is a stinker, is boring, has nothing going on for it, pulls back from any kind of special effects shot and tries to have something implied, but not in any kind of creative way, but more just because they had no other option. I always say that low budget should not stifle creativity, it should inspire it. And whenever I say that, I have images of Evil Dead 2 in my mind. I have images of a camera strapped to a motorcycle running through a cabin. I have images of a camera strapped to a pole smashing through the windshield of an Oldsmobile 88 Delta. I have images of Bruce Campbell being strapped to a spinning wheel and thrown around all over the place while people smack him in the head with branches. I have in my head that level of rogue creativity that didn't show that a lack of budget could mean that you can get away with just having nothing on screen except for bland dialogue and no effects, but rather that you can really inspire things and just go all out. You can raid your grandmother's pantry and get the cornstarch out and the food coloring out and make your own stuff. And this was an era before YouTube videos. This was an era where you had to read how to do castings and makeups and so forth out of magazines and try to piecemeal stuff together from other folks in the industry and write letters and hope that somebody responds. The fact that Evil Dead 2 exists and works so well takes the wind out of a lot of excuses that are floating around out there. Anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. If you haven't seen Evil Dead 2, I do heartily recommend it. It might not be to your liking. It might not be to your taste, but I do think that it is an iconic entry in horror that really did reinvent the genre, just in the same way that a lot of slashers did. And every generation we have new movies come forth and just turn the entire game on its head. I think that for me, Evil Dead 2 is an iconic classic and should be an entry in every horror movie lover's watch list. So thank you for joining me here today on this 500th review. Take care, everybody. Look forward to seeing you on my next video, which should be out tomorrow. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror film, first make sure that it's good and rotted.
Groovy.